Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Care and Keeping of Volunteers and Volunteer Programs. My name is Jessie, and I'll be your host this afternoon. This session will be recorded and shared to our YouTube channel in case any of you or your colleagues are unable to view it live, or in case you'd like to watch it again after the fact. We are gathered here to share stories and advice about how to work with, recruit, develop, and manage people that don't get paid for their hard work. Volunteers play a crucial role in not-for-profit organizations like libraries, and being able to manage volunteer-run programs and the volunteers themselves can make an enormous difference to the success of your organization. It is my hope that by the end of this webinar, you will be feeling inspired and empowered to take fresh steps towards cultivating a volunteer program that will benefit your community and your library. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Maureen Penn, Director of Lac La Biche County Libraries.
So I've been in the library field quite a few years, over 30, which is why I'll be retiring at the end of this year. And I've had volunteers in various facets. So the introduction that Jessie shared with the invite today's training shared the fact that I've done student volunteers, work experience students, as well as regular volunteers, and of course, board and Friends of the Library volunteers. I've been involved in all those facets. And there are some volunteering best practices, but we also have to remember that the heart of a volunteer is priceless. So we want to treat them with respect and dignity, and volunteering on their side can reduce stress, improve mental and physical health, hopefully makes them feel good, can boost their happiness, reduce loneliness because it often gives, especially people once they've retired, an opportunity to have a social outing and meet new people, encouraging social interaction and reducing depression. So how to get started? If you haven't had volunteers before, it might be a daunting task to figure out where to start. So you should have a process for promoting and a easy way to apply and process to vet the candidates. So I am going to stop sharing for a second because I'm going to switch to our website. So we actually have a volunteering page on our website. I'm hoping everybody can see it. If I can just have a thumbs up from Erin or Nicole just to make sure that it's switched. So we have a regular slide that goes out on our social media. So that's Instagram, Facebook, X, which is formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. So we ask for volunteers, general volunteers, and as you can see right now, we are calling for volunteers for our youth committee. We're one of the few boards in the province that actually has a full-fledged youth committee, our youth board member who actually gets a chance to vote. Plus, we have a youth ambassador that serves on our board as well, in addition to our youth committee. We call for volunteers. We have the volunteer application right on our website, so it's nice and easy in terms of volunteer hours. Our form is on our website, so we can track those hours because that does play a big factor when you're applying for grants, not just the public library services grants, but also other grants that we've applied for before. They look to see how many volunteers that you have and how many hours are put in a calendar year. While you're on site, we actually have a nice little QR code so they can put their hours in right while they're on site. And then we talk about our library board, which we work, of course, with the county to fill any board vacancies. Currently, we are full up, but that will be changing because we have a couple of people who are coming to their end of their term. So they have to submit an application form, and we also require a cover letter on our end as well as a resume. They go to the county and then the county sends them to us for vetting, and then we make a selection and it goes for ratification. So don't forget about your board members. They are volunteers as well. And go back to my presentation. So in terms of vetting the candidates, all our volunteers, whether they are work experience students, regular volunteers, we actually go through an interview process. So especially for the work experience students, this might be the first time they actually have a chance to have an interview. and it gives them some experience. So when they go for their first job, they have a better understanding of what to expect. So they submit their application. We sit down with them during the interview. That's when we start to see if they have any skills that they love or things that they like doing. Like, do they have a hobby? And that would align with maybe one of our programs. So once we've had that interview, then they have an orientation, which also includes them signing a confidentiality agreement. So this does not necessarily mean they work on Polaris and deal with patrons' accounts, but they still are privileged, might overhear privileged information while on site. So that is a requirement. We also require a criminal record check for all our volunteers over the age of 18, and it does not matter whether they're working with the vulnerable section or not. It is just a requirement in our policies. We provide an orientation for them. They have to review our safety documentation, so that's our emergency binder. They get a library tour, they get introduced to the staff, they get an explanation of the tracking of volunteer hours, including where to find the QR code, where to find it on our website, and the regular duties that they'll be working on. So during that time, we ensure that we train them with their shelving books. We provide that training if they're doing something else. We don't just um, give them no instructions other than here's the list of stuff to do. We make sure that they understand the tasks as assigned. In some cases, we actually have some volunteers that will help with our preschool programs. So then they get the directions from our program coordinator or the ones that are leading that particular program for the day. Make sure that there's direct lines of communication that are open. So, for example, if we had an emergency and we had to be closed, that we know that we have to follow up with the volunteers to let them know not to come in. And the same way, especially when it comes to our work experience students, which come in on a daily basis from the high school, they're check in with us and let us know if they're not feeling well and won't be coming in, so that we're not waiting for them to arrive and getting worried about them. So we also explain who will be overseeing, because we found out through trial and error that having all staff dealing with volunteers is not the way to go. Having a couple of people that are actually assigning the tasks beyond the regular list of duties for our regular volunteers works more effectively for us. So we do maintain a task list for our volunteers. And I'm just going to briefly show this, but Jesse will be sharing that after the presentation via email, I believe. So some of the regular tasks, so this is beyond the programming. It is from anything from shelving books to assisting with donations. Now, when I say help with kit assembly, that means helping put together take and make kits, sometimes even creating the take and make kits. So depending on the skills, like if they're saying they're very creative and they like making things, this might be, they're planning it, they're creating the instructions, they're putting the kits together, even giving the order list of materials to be ordered for those kits. With our gaming systems, we have a VR system on site, Xbox and Switch. So sometimes we have volunteers testing new games. Because we have staff occasionally working by themselves, and when somebody is playing the VR, we do need someone to sit with them. This is also where we can draw on volunteers to help with that. So if you've got some youth in your community that really like gaming, or even adults, this could be a way that they can share their expertise and knowledge and help make it a better experience. So with the gaming system on the Xbox, we actually have Game Pass. So we have to evaluate new games before they go on Game Pass, because we make sure that they're family friendly games and not X-rated materials to be in the library. So when I say other programming assistance, that could be helping with, for example, our Lego competition, getting ready for that, maybe even helping using Canva to create promotional materials. Again, we're going to be drawing back on the skills that they've said that they have, or the areas that they prefer to do. Blog, this is for our older website. We do regular blogs. We've had at least 5 volunteers that have done blogs in the past, including 2 that actually are professional librarians now. So they did the research, they got all the links, and uh, other than putting it on the website, they basically wrote those blogs. So you can see that we also have light cleaning and dusting, toy cleaning. So this is a list that there's always something that a volunteer can do when they come in. There's never a time when we don't have something. So this is just a quick list. And then if there's other projects, they'd be as assigned. Our person that's responsible for overseeing the volunteers is actually our program coordinator. So that's how that we can sort of match even better if they want to be working on programming. So I've already talked about matching volunteer with skills a little bit, and now volunteer recognition. So volunteer recognition, we didn't have anything in writing, but with me retiring, we actually finally put something in writing in terms of how we handle it. So I will also preface, our board is a complete volunteer board. They do not get honorariums. And they used to get mileage, but they kept giving the mileage money back. So instead of putting more administrative tasks on somebody's plate, we just don't do mileage right now. Now, if somebody really needed mileage, if they were from one of our outlining communities and they couldn't otherwise make it into a board meeting, which we also do online meetings now, which makes it even easier, then we would honor that and reimburse them the mileage. So gifts are given at the end of the year or their term. So we do, we also, if we have a volunteer, like for our ladies' night, we get members of the community to lead set parts of our ladies' night. So for example, one person did macrame. So we don't expect that person to spend money on the supplies, even if it's their business. We also had someone who does stained glass, and that's her business. So that we pay for all their supplies, and then we also make sure that they get a gift for their time spent. So you can, I'm not going to go through everything, but we actually have broken it down by regular, knowledgeable, one time, short term, long term, and consistent. Consistent, we actually have one person that has volunteered. I think we're up to 7 years. And his nickname is Papa Paul, and he actually does the guitar for our Rhyme Time program. So we want to make sure that we're recognize them. So when we're doing our library con, we actually have a section to cover vendors because we actually have had trade fairs. So moving forward, it means once a new director's in place of me, they can take a look at the sheet and say, oh, well, what do I do for vendors for the upcoming event? So you can see we have a payment or honorarium sheet, a gift giving sheet for our volunteers right on here. And I believe that's it, unless there's questions. I wanted to keep it short and sweet because I know there's other presenters and everybody's time is precious.
If you have questions, but you're not comfortable using your mic, or maybe your mic isn't up to snuff, do feel free to put them into the chat. And you will get another chance to ask questions at the very end. And I'm hoping that because this is a recorded event, I might be able to convince our presenters to perhaps share their emails at the end in case anybody wants to follow up with a question. So I will leave that to them if they wish to. Okay. Seeing no questions at the moment, I am going to open up the floor to our next speaker, Nicole Labrie, who is the library manager at Bonnyville Municipal Library. So welcome, Nicole, and thank you for joining us.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. First off, I would just like to start by saying, wow, maybe I should have asked Maureen for some help before jumping into my own volunteer program. Because I'm about to kind of give you an idea, a different side of the volunteering aspect. So to start off, I'll say that I started in this position November of 2022. And when I came in, one of my goals was to increase programming in the library and also bring in more youth into our library because youth numbers had been going down quite a bit. And one of the ways I thought to bring in youth in the community to the library was through volunteering programs. Um, Imagine my surprise when I asked some of the more longer term staff, what is the volunteering like here? They said that it hadn't been a thing for several years. They had a couple work experience students come in, but then they were giving them more of the grunt work. So a lot of shelf cleaning, dusting, making sure all the DVDs were in the cases, and it's not an attractive type of job. It's not, you like, they were not getting very many people in of any age to volunteer. So I was like, okay, how can we turn this around? um so I started chatting with our programmer, and we decided we would try and bring in volunteers to help with our summer reading program. And so they would assist our summer student primarily, and we were like, cool, great, this is going to be so easy. Our requirement was you had to be between 14 and 18 years old, and you had to like working with kids. So as you can see, we didn't have a very high bar or very many standards or very many requirements, period. Um, and so part of well, really our only recruiting process was we're going to talk to people at interagency, and we're going to get in touch with outreach school, and just word of mouth, we'll see who we can get. Now you might be thinking, wow, that's not great. And it was not great. We had 2 volunteers, and that's all we ended up getting. It was just 2 youth volunteers. And one of them was actually 12 years old, turning 13. So it was even younger than our minimum age requirement. But because at that point we were quite desperate for help, so we let her come on anyways. Um, so now, a year later, we are switching things up. Rather than promoting our volunteer program middle of June to start beginning of July, we started promoting it at the beginning of May. We reached out to all of our schools, again, promoted it through interagency. And then we also reached out to our local youth hub, the Hive, and we went to their career fair. And so we talked to a lot of youths there and got a lot of people interested in the library. And then instead of having our one requirement be, do you like working with kids? It is now, do you like working with kids? Yes, but we're talking about availability and everything right from the jump. Just now we know a little bit more. It's still pretty bare bones, but we're working on refining our process still to this day. One of the things that we did do pretty early on was create a volunteer agreement, which I'll just share really quickly. So this is the volunteer agreement that I put together last year. I took it from, so I found it online and I kind of just adapted it to our own purposes. When you look at it, you would think that it covers things fairly well. It's got the roles and responsibility of a volunteer. But now looking at this a year later, I would make some changes. Where it says that with the services approved by the manager, myself with input from the programmer or assistant librarian, we found out that our programmer was not as involved in the process, or in the goings on of the summer reading program as we thought. Our volunteers primarily went to our summer student for help or concerns, or they actually came to me with concerns, which is totally fine, but we were skipping a level in the hierarchy. So again, that comes down to something that we didn't do very well last year, which was enforcing standards. And that's okay. We're learning as we go here. So this year we're going to refine this contract a little bit more, but I do think this kind of contract is very important to have. And of course, if you'd like to take a closer look at this or borrow it for yourself and tweak it for yourself, you're more than welcome. Let me see what else. So as I mentioned earlier, we tried to bring in, between 14 and 18 years old. And part of the recruiting process last year, we didn't really ask for a resume or a letter of recommendation or anything. We kind of just went on a recommendation of a friend or a teacher. So if they came from that reach school, we just talked to their a teacher there or the principal there. And if they said, yep, this person has, great marks in school, they've worked with kids before, I think they'd be a great fit. We didn't really even question it. We brought them in, chatted with them for about 5 minutes and said, okay, we're good to go. This year, however, we are asking for a cover letter, not necessarily a resume, because they may not have had jobs before, they may not have worked before. So just a letter of intent. If they do have references, we'll call references. Absolutely. And then we're going to do a mini interview as well. So I think for me, one of the more difficult things last year was like, how do I treat a volunteer versus a paid employee? This year we're going to take the tack that we're not going to really make any differential with that. We're going to go through the onboarding process exactly the same as we would with a paid employee. And then we'll see how that goes for the year after. Yeah, so I'm hoping this year will go a little bit more smoothly. Last year we did have quite a few hiccups, particularly when it came to the timekeeping and timeliness of our volunteers. They tended to, because we didn't enforce many of our rules with them, if they had to cancel or come late to a shift, they would just let us know about 15 minutes ahead of time through a text message or so. And that didn't really cut it at all, because then we were leaving our summer student in the lurch quite often, and that really impacted her, the way she ran her programs. So this year, give us at least 2 hours notice if you need to cancel or reschedule or come late for your shift. And then, yeah, that's one of the biggest lessons learned. A second lesson, and a bit more humorous lesson that I learned, is don't really show them where the snacks are kept. I mean, because they can hand out the snacks, but for what we learned was they were taking a water break or a washroom break, and then they would come back and eat the snacks that were meant for the next day's program or program later on in the day. And then so we would run out of that day's food, which is unfortunate. So yeah, that one is I I don't know. Maybe it's just, I don't know. I'm hoping that was just a one-off kind of thing. And then something that I kind of learned the hard way is, I don't want to come out and be like, I'm an empathetic person, but I do feel a lot for people. So if they're saying, I have a stomach ache, I need to take more breaks. And I'd always be like, okay, no problem. Yes, go rest, relax. If you need to go home, I'll help you call your mom. But as time went on last summer, I noticed that they were kind of doing this fairly regularly. It became a pattern. And I just didn't know how to handle that. So again, it's one of those things where if I would not call it out necessarily with a paid employee, I should be doing the same with a volunteer, like addressing it kindly and then exploring why they're uncomfortable up at the front. Maybe this is not something that they're interested in. Maybe they say they like to work with kids, but they actually don't. Maybe, or maybe there's a particular person in that group, especially, with the younger girl that we hired. She was only turning 13 that summer. So she was essentially working with her peers. And that may have been uncomfortable for her. And I feel like I didn't really do my duty in sitting down and chatting with her and just making sure she was okay with that kind of dynamic. So that's a bit of a lesson learned from me. Yeah, so definitely this year we're making some changes to our onboarding process. We're making sure everyone knows our health and safety plan. Um, and we're just trying to make it, more, I don't know what the word is that I'm trying to think of, but making sure everyone is more knowledgeable, more comfortable working with each other, and that they understand their roles and the responsibility they play at the library as a volunteer instead of just winging it. Mhm. Yeah, so hopefully, hopefully you can kind of pick up on a little bit of what not to do, but also I'm more than willing to like talk about what did not work for us, which unfortunately is more than what did work. But like I said, this is a brand new program to the library. My programmer Kat and I were still also pretty new on the care and keeping of volunteers. And so this will be our second crack at it, and like really genuinely fingers crossed that we do better. I will say that we did have two success stories, but they were with adults. One is running our French language, our bilingual story time, and we are actually going to hire her on as a part-time paid programmer. And then one runs our Pokemon card league. So I think maybe because they're adults and we kind of just let them do their own thing but we consider them more experts. It is maybe a little bit different. I don't know. But it's not all doom and gloom, but there's a silver lining.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming on to share like what didn't work for you, Nicole, because
Mhm.
it's super relatable to try something and to take a risk and then to be like, oof. Um, and I sympathize with that because I step in it all the time. You guys watch me do it. And so I really like this and I think that it will go better next time around.
Yeah, like I do think it will. We definitely learned a lot, and I don't want this to be like totally as a tales of caution kind of thing, but I just want to maybe normalize that it's not going to go perfectly, especially in the beginning. Um, so yeah, I'm willing to get advice and learn from other people too, and we're gonna just all grow together.
I love that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Nicole? All right. I feel like I'm reverting to like governance speak, seeing none. We will keep going. But Nicole, please do feel free to throw your email address into the chat just so people have it fresh in case they want to follow up with you or reach out in that fashion. And we will keep going. Our third and final panelist today is Erin Navarro, and she is the Senior Coordinator of Learning and Resources at Volunteer Alberta. So thank you very much, Erin, for joining us today. I am very excited to have you, and I'm super pumped to hear what you have to say. I feel like I'm participating more as like a viewer than like as the host right now. So I'm like absorbing everything. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and giving me a chance to speak. Nicole, I totally relate to right at the beginning, trying things and having it not work. And I feel like that is the normal experience because you're working with a unique group of people. And so there's always something that can be improved or changed. So I definitely resonate with that. So like Jesse said, my name is Erin Navarro. Basil, my ideas assistant, is assisting me from the floor right now. So if you ever have another meeting or workshop or call with me, she will likely be supervising me. And so I am from Volunteer Alberta, And we are a diverse and inclusive member association, strengthening and creating pathways for volunteerism and civic engagement. We've been around since 1990. But specifically today, this presentation is brought to you by the Volunteer Screening Program, or VSP. We're a partnership between VA and the government of Alberta. And we do things like this. We provide educational resources and tools. We provide webinars. I just did a workshop in Lac La Biche in March, and I believe I met your program coordinator, Maureen, at that presentation. And we also offer financial opportunities. So we have the vulnerable sector check fee waiver for participating municipalities. And we also are offering the volunteer screening development micro grants, and those applications will be open just in a couple of weeks in mid-June here. So you can keep an eye out for those. And I always have to say this, we do not provide legal advice, so it's just some generally useful information, and any specific concerns you should bring to a legal professional. So I was wondering if we could start by typing in the chat, why do we screen? You can answer specifically for your organization or for the sector, or why you personally believe that we screen volunteers as volunteer engagement specialists. Just wait a second. Yeah, if you have any ideas as to why we screen, I'd love to hear it in the chat. Keep people safe. Try and match suitable volunteers with programs where they will succeed. Match skills to volunteer duties. Help make sure they are a fit for the library, that we can offer them an opportunity that works for them. Yes, you're all onto something. So we heard in a previous survey that VSP did, called Changing the Conversation, that other volunteer engagement specialists agree with you. It's about promoting community safety, and it's about matching volunteers to meaningful roles that benefit not only the organization or the participants in a program, but also the volunteer and perhaps the entire community. So it is a both and answer, safety and matchmaking. Something to also note here is that all of our resources at the volunteer screening program, and how I filter information is through this definition of relationship-based screening. And we define that as screening practices that emphasize human connection, empathy, and mutual understanding. Relationship-based screening goes beyond collecting personal documents, as it welcomes volunteers to participate and be equal players in the volunteer screening process, while organizations can create safe and meaningful volunteer programming to promote volunteerism rather than preventing it. And some key phrases here are on human connection, empathy, and mutual understanding. But where we want to get to is safe and meaningful volunteer programming. But it's really important that we make our way to that goal of safe and meaningful volunteer programming with human connection, with empathy, with mutual understanding, and really trust interwoven throughout all aspects of our program. And I've heard this definition in both presentations so far, just what was said about introducing the volunteer to staff and having the clear communication so that they know who to ask questions to, so they don't feel thrown in the deep end and left to their own devices. And what you were saying too, Nicole, about having those conversations with volunteers and going to the recruitment events and having, those, being able to introduce yourself. I think those are all reflective of relationship-based screening. And my hunch is that you all do this in some way or another. But this definition has definitely helped me to narrow down and filter, okay, how can we reflect this in the information that we talk about and how we do the volunteer screening program to support your relationship-based screening at your organizations. So some trends that we've seen based on research and also community conversations based around what volunteers are interested in. They're looking for short-term, episodic, or project-based roles. I definitely found when I was a previous volunteer coordinator, even if the role could be long-term, they could be in it for a year or more. I always tried to chunk it into short term. Let's try it for a month. Let's try it for 2 months, 3 months. We'll reevaluate. I'll take you out for coffee. And if you want to keep going, then we can keep going or renew or change the role. And it just helps to make it a bit more short term instead of the overwhelming long term. They're also looking for roles that are results driven and are skills based, so they can see what all of their work is going towards. And then the skills based part kind of reflects the next reason is just related to their own individual interests and passions. Like I forget which, I think it was Nicole's presentation about the Pokemon card league. I believe it was Nicole's who said that. That sounds like a very special interest, and to be able to bring that into your volunteer work is really cool. And I think that sounds like a really engaging role for that person. Or perhaps they're also looking for references for future jobs, or to be able to add to their resume. So something that we can offer them to reflect their interests and their own goals. And then also roles that are reciprocal, that they benefit the volunteer, the community, the participants, and the organization. And to be able to communicate that and how that is happening to the volunteer can also help with engagement. In terms of level of engagement, volunteers are looking for flexible opportunities that fit their schedule. I know that a lot of us probably have many different things going on, and volunteering can become costly in terms of time. Roles that are informal or virtual. Informal can just mean perhaps there are less steps to get involved, or perhaps it's, you communicate, we have this event on this day, would you like to be a part of it? Then come along if you'd like to be a part. And then virtual too. Even if the whole role isn't necessarily virtual, are there perhaps parts of it that can be done from home? And then positions that start right away and have a clear call to action. I'll talk about the clear call to action in a second, but definitely I found when I was volunteer coordinating, so many roles required multiple steps because of the risk that was involved. And so a volunteer might not be a part of their desired role for maybe a couple months. But then I would try and offer monthly events or orientations that weren't necessarily the role they wanted, but then they could come along within that month of first reaching out so that they can meet other volunteers and other staff and get to know the organization more. And we have seen in different reports that volunteers are really looking to start within a month of first reaching out to an organization. So there are ways to finesse it, even though some roles might take a bit longer. I found some ways around that to help with engagement. On the flip side, why aren't people volunteering? So one that my colleagues and I talk about pretty regularly is just how expensive it is to volunteer, considering gas costs, mileage, considering if there's childcare that's needed, perhaps it's giving up a shift at work and losing some income that way. They don't have time, especially with the increased cost of living, having to work multiple jobs or pick up some extra shifts. That can also decrease people's volunteerism rates. Nobody asks. I know that from very recent data, but also what we've been seeing time and time again, is that your current volunteers are your biggest recruiting force. And to even ask your current volunteers to go talk to friends and family if they'd like to come along and join them at their next volunteer event is a great way to recruit new volunteers. And then the person who is already volunteering with you, if they're telling their loved ones, come along to this organization, I think that's a great indicator that they trust you to take care of their loved one. They don't see the impact. Again, I'll end the presentation talking more about clear calls to action and impact. They don't know where to find opportunities. It sounds like there's been some measures taken from just reaching out to the FCSS, and for example, but it can be quite overwhelming if you don't know where to start. There are systemic barriers in place, so especially for equity deserving groups who may have little to no trust with law enforcement, getting a background check might deter people from volunteering. Perhaps they don't have a permanent address to even be able to apply for a background check. Perhaps newcomers, for example, might not have a huge network of references for you to call on if they're looking to be, if that is a requirement for you. So there's just different considerations that we can consider when we're looking to diversify who our volunteers could be. And then also we don't know. So especially in a post-COVID world, if I can say that, there is still more research being done. VA is doing more research about what volunteerism and civic engagement means to different community members. So just keep an eye out too, because there are still answers waiting to be found. So the last question and offering I'd like to give you all for the end of the presentation is just considering how you tell the story of the mission and vision of your organization. And how are volunteers contributing and even a part of that story of the mission and vision? So from the moment you first interact with a volunteer or potential volunteer, and then even while they're engaged throughout that life cycle of the volunteer, it's important to be able to tell that story, as well as their impact, how their story is interwoven into the overall story of your organization. It can also help create or reevaluate volunteer opportunities. So what I did in a previous organization, we did a reevaluation of some of our roles and the tasks within those roles. And we asked ourselves, what is the connection here between this role and what we're trying to do as an organization? And if that connection wasn't clear, we either adjusted the role, or in some cases, we got rid of certain tasks or realized, you know, this role isn't really working for us, working towards our end goals. So we actually got rid of some roles. So then those opportunities then can be closely tied to the mission and vision of your organization. So I'll give you an example too of how this helped with engagement for volunteers. So I worked at an anti-trafficking organization, and we offered recovery programming and housing for participants. And so many volunteers looked to do frontline work that was working directly with participants, but one volunteer who had some really strong administrative skills and interests said, what is there for me as somebody who wants to do admin to support your organization? And it would have been so easy to say, can you sit at the front desk and take calls? Can you, you know, shred all this paper? But we had this back storage room, which perhaps some of us have those back storage rooms that we don't even want to look at because they can become so disorganized, that stored, you know, feminine hygiene products and shampoo and toothbrushes and all of those basic necessities. And I said, would you be interested in coming in and organizing this back room? The reason why it's really important to us is because some participants come into programming without a toothbrush, without a bar of soap, and hasn't necessarily had access to that. So ensuring that the back storage room is organized just helps support the staff get those basic necessities to the participants so that they can feel at home and welcome and taken care of within the housing program, for example. So I said, let's do it for a day. She was interested. Let's do it for the day. I'll be around if you need anything, and then we can reconvene at the end of the day and see how you're feeling. And so it turns out that they loved it, and it was clear, and they totally own the space. It's like, I know that feminine hygiene products, you know, pads and tampons might need to be urgently picked up, so I'm going to put that at the front of the room. I'm going to put some of the other like winter jackets that we don't need right away at the back, and they just totally owned the space. And what wound up happening was, since there was trust of and a clear call to action, they came in multiple times, maybe once, twice a month, just to make sure everything was organized and tidy, and that we had enough supplies. So that is one example of how asking these questions really, really helped me engage volunteers and also care for them, in the sense that their energy that they were giving to us freely really mattered. And it was, I think, part of my due diligence to share why they are making an impact, even with an afternoon of cleaning. So for the volunteer screening program, I can put all these links in the chat, or you can reach out to me. Either is fine, but you can apply today. I don't know where everyone is located, but I don't believe there's any participating municipalities for the fee waiver, but we do have the micro grants coming. And you're always welcome to reach out to me. VSP also offers free coaching. So if you ever want to set up a meeting, or if you're looking for a specific resource, we might have something out there, everything from risk assessments to webinars on recruitment and engaging newcomers, volunteer rights. We have lots of resources that you can also access via our library, but never hesitate to give me an email or give me a call. And I believe that's it. So I will stop sharing and pass it back to Jessie.
Awesome. Thank you very much to Erin, Nicole, and Maureen for sharing your expertise with us today. I am going to just offer again my incredible thankfulness to our panelists for sharing their expertise, their experiences, their stories of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what would stick. I found this super, super informative, and I hope that our audience members did too. And again, yeah, thank you guys for participating as audience members, and thank you to our panelists for guiding us with their wisdom today. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for
Have a
having
great
me.
day. Thank you.